by introducing the subject. It's on the agenda as trends in education. It is a trend that we view with mixed emotions because it is interjecting an element of public policy, an element of legal considerations that we haven't really dealt with very directly in the past. Fortunately, knock on wood, MSF for 15 years has been involved in very little litigation. And individually, we have not heard about that much that takes place among the states or the independent programs. I would like to think that's because of the quality of our courses and because of the quality of our instructors and the instruction that you folks put out. It's probably not going to last forever because in the public sector, litigation is a fact of life, particularly in the motorcycle and ATV business. We would like to address this head on. We would like you folks to be in the forefront of knowledge and awareness and caution and consideration about the subject of liability in education programs. We've asked a guest speaker here today who is very knowledgeable in the subject. Dr. Neil Doherty, which we had some debates about the pronunciation yesterday. Everybody on staff guessed wrong, and only Dr. Doherty knows the correct pronunciation. He is a professor at Rutgers University. His specialty is the field of safety and liability. Functioning as the director of the School of Applied Health Sciences, he's involved with this in an academic way. He has written some 6 textbooks about the subject, the primary one of which is called The Principles of Safety. Also published 30 articles on the subject, one of which we published with his permission in Safe Cycling last year. I'm sure many of you read that. And more than 50 presentations like this nationwide on the subject of safety, liability, and education. I chatted with him last night and found out that he also has a practical experience in this. He has served as a consultant in some 400 cases of liability and lawsuits. And so I think there's probably no greater qualification than that combination of the academic and the practical experience to bring to us today. And I would like us to listen to this and give it good consideration. He is not here to scare us out of the business. In fact, he is here to tell us that we are the business of safety. And I was pleased to see his practical approach to this, his balanced approach of making us aware of the subject and making us the experts in the field. So, Dr. Doherty, I welcome you.
I will start off by professing my ignorance. I am not an expert in motorcycling or in motorcycle safety. I think I have some, I'll take a dozen 8x10 glasses. I think I have some knowledge of safety and liability, and I know that that knowledge is generalizable. And so what I will be doing is sharing with you those principles of liability so that you can generalize them to your expertise. I'm not going to tell you how to make a given program safer or a given road course safer. I don't know. You do. You're the experts. But I think I can tell you what to watch out for and what not to watch out for. Let's put it in perspective first. The problem is increasing. The problem of lawsuits is increasing. More people are suing. They're asking for more money. There's a number of reasons. First is insurance shortfalls. Here's what I mean. Most times when someone is injured, after the smoke dies down, after everybody pays everything they're going to pay, after the insurance companies pay what they're going to pay, there's still a hole in somebody's pocketbook. When was the last time you heard of Blue Cross Blue Shield paying all the expenses? If the person is left with a hole in their pocketbook, there is no way left for them to get that money back other than a lawsuit. I don't know how rich you are, but if I'm left with an extra $1,000 or $2,000 worth of medical bills that I didn't expect, that's a big whack out of my bank account. And if there's no way left for me to get it but a lawsuit, I'm bound to start thinking about a lawsuit, especially if I know other people have been suing, and if I know they've been winning. Point two, law of this country says anyone can sue anyone else at any time for any reason. Winning it may be another matter, but bringing that suit is essentially a matter of right. To make it more important to you, we have a concept in the law known as respondeat superior, a nice, fancy legal term, right? It means in English that a law case is one of the few places in the world where garbage rolls uphill. What that means is, if an instructor that you trained, back it down a step, a person who took a safety course is injured, they are probably going to sue, name the instructor who was trained. If the instructor can in any way generalize it to name the person who trained him or her, they're going to say, if they'd have trained me right, it wouldn't have happened. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to name the motorcycle that the person was riding on, because they happen to be riding on it, and they have what we call a deep pocket. Okay? We have what's called a doctrine of entitlement. It's not a legal doctrine. It's not like the Monroe Doctrine. You won't find it written someplace. It's a mindset that jurors have. It's a very humanitarian mindset. What it means, in essence, is somebody got hurt, not expecting to, not wanting to, and maybe not doing anything necessarily wrong. They have a hole in their pocketbook. Somebody ought to pay. It's not a bad theory. It's not an unreasonable theory. The problem is that when there's a lawsuit, the only someone is the person who's getting sued, and they may or may not have been negligent. Add to that the fact that 90+% of all civil suits are settled out of court. Please, if you are ever sued, if you ever hear of anyone who is sued and you hear it settled out of court, do not assume it's an admission of guilt. It is not. It's simply a financial expediency. In general, insurance companies work on the concept of dollars saved. And when the bottom line gets to a certain point, they pay, rather than take a risk of going any further. Let me give you an example, a nice safe one. Doesn't involve motorcycling. I was called to defend a teacher who was being sued for negligence in a physical education class with a gymnastics accident. The teacher was absolutely not negligent. Girl went to do a vault. She'd done umpteen times. They had spotters, they had mats, they had everything you need. She hit the horse in the front of the horse and blew her knee away. They started out by suing for $300 and some odd thousand. By the time we got to court, they were willing to take $100 and some odd thousand. And the insurance company kept saying, no way on earth. We are not paying off. Our teacher is not negligent. With each successive witness, it became more and more obvious that the teacher was not negligent, and that in fact the case was going to be won. Finally, there was one witness left to go. It was me as the expert for the defense. And one thing Alan didn't tell you is that in those 400+ law cases, I've only been involved in 5 that went the wrong way. And 3 of them got turned over in appeals. I don't like losing, okay? And I was about to paint this lady out like Joan of Arc. And as far as I'm concerned, we'd already won the case anyway. And they said, we'll take $25,000. And the insurance company said, take it and go home. And I almost fell off the chair. I said, wait a minute, you've already won this case. This is crazy. What are you doing? They said, hold it, Neil, hold it. What's the date? I said, I don't know, November 15th. What difference does it make? They said, you want to bet the jury won't give this kid an early Christmas present? Before you answer that, Neil, tell me about the kid. Okay. She was a college freshman at the time. When she was injured, she was in junior high school. And by the way, that's not a long time for a suit to drag on. Knee injury, terrible. 2 operations, big scars on each side of the knee, and every doctor that looked at her said there's a knee replacement in the foreseeable future. And they said, Neil, look a little higher. I don't want to sound chauvinistic, but this was one beautiful young lady. She was magnificent, except for the bad scar, the limp, the pain, etc., etc., etc. They say, we figure the outside limits of liability. The max the jury can give that kid if they want to give her a gift, $1.25 million. You subtract 25,000 from $1.25 million, and you tell us how much we just saved. End of argument. Anybody can sue. Lo and behold, the jury thinks you ought to have money, and insurance companies are giving money away. Add one more thing to that. Now you can get most attorneys on what's called a contingency fee. If they win, they get a third. If they lose, they get nothing. Anybody can sue. I've got a hole in my pocketbook. They're giving money away, and now I've got a no-risk attorney. Okay? That's why the suits are out there. And there's one more problem. If you're dealing with a physical skill, it's impossible to be totally risk-free. Right? I mean, there's no way you people, and believe me, I read your materials, I read your instructor's guides and everything else. For my money, you're among the safest organizations I've come across. There's no way you people can prevent all accidents, as good as you are. And you'll be the first to admit that, I'm sure. As long as somebody can get on a bike and the bike can somehow fall over, someone can get hurt, and there's nothing you can do about that. Well, if that injury is there, every time there's an injury or a loss, there's a potential suit. Doesn't mean you were negligent. Doesn't mean you'll lose. But there is a potential suit. So all we can do is try to make ourselves as safe as possible, because we're really concerned with that, and also to try to make ourselves as loss-free as possible. When someone sues, let's try to make sure that they can't get any money. Okay. When someone sues, there are several legal requirements, 5 as a matter of fact. The first is loss. You have to show that there was a loss, i.e. an injury, doctor's fees, medical expenses, etc. Very easy to show. Some states have a threshold. New Jersey has a threshold. Before you can sue a municipal entity, in other words, a program in the state, a state-supported program or a school-run program, you have to have $1,000 worth of medical expenses. Folks, you get that on a hurt finger, and I didn't even say broken. Okay? So that's a gimme. It's easy. Then you have to show a duty. You have to show the person had a duty or a responsibility to protect the injured party. If they're in a program that you're conducting, you have a duty for them. If they took a program that you conducted, you may have a duty. If they're using your materials, you may have a duty, right? So the duty is pretty easy to show too. Then you have to show a breach of that duty, an act of negligence. That's an act of omission or commission. You did something you should not have done, or you failed to do something that you should have done. Many of you have probably heard of what we call the prudent person principle. And what that is, what you must do is what a reasonably prudent person would do under the same or similar circumstances. That is entirely correct as far as it goes. But let's understand it in the context of the court. That prudent person is a prudent expert in your field. They don't go out on the street, go to someone and say, you look awfully prudent. Would you come in here and tell this jury whether what this person did is right or wrong? It doesn't work that way. They get an expert. If it was the kind of fields I work in, it's going to be somebody with my kind of credentials. A half a dozen books and a doctorate, and it doesn't mean I can teach my way out of a paper bag, but it'll dazzle a jury, and that's what it has to do. Each of you people are probably the most likely experts in motorcycling injury cases. You are the trainers of teachers. You are the experts. You are the ideal expert. And so, even if you want to believe that you are never going to get sued, and indeed you may never, understand this, you may very well be called and asked if you will serve as an expert. Now, I'm not suggesting that, and I talked about this with Alan, and Alan immediately got his hackles up when I mentioned expert, because he immediately thought of plaintiff. I said, what about defense? What about the guy in the next state who's getting sued, who did nothing wrong? And now they call you in your state because of your name and your reputation, and they say, John is being sued, and we need an expert. Here's what happened. Can you help? Well, the more you know about the legal principles, the more you'll be able to help. The more properly you'll be able to help. The next element is foreseeability. Foreseeability is predictability. You don't have to predict the exact injury to the exact person, just the likelihood of an injury to a person. I take a whole group of people, first time on motorcycles, I say, okay, everybody on motorcycles, see that little course there? You have to do it at 40 miles an hour. Ready? Go. Boom. I don't have to predict that person X is going to fall and fracture an arm, person Y is going right over the handlebars in a swan dive, and if person Z is going to make it. All I have to predict is that if I take a group of people, age, skill, ability unknown, put them on a course and say, rip through this thing at 40 miles an hour, someone's likely to get hurt. That's how foreseeable it has to be. It doesn't have to be real explicit. The last is proximate cause. Another fancy legal term. By the way, does anybody know why lawyers use fancy terms? That's exactly right. Because it sounds great and they can charge you more. Most of them don't mean much in English. Proximate cause is really a very simple term. Here's what it means. It means it's not enough that you were negligent. It's not enough that it was foreseeable. Your specific act of negligence, and by the way, that's an act of an instant. You could win an award here today as the safest, most outstanding instructor trainer in the world and be found guilty of negligence tomorrow. Conversely, we could know a person was the most unsafe, blatantly risk-taking, dangerous person out there. And if you can't show proximate cause, it doesn't matter, because proximate cause says the specific act of negligence must have caused or aggravated the specific injury. I'm going to give you another example, and it's going to be out of motorcycling again. For two reasons. One, because I don't know a lot about motorcycling, and two, because I don't want to create a scenario that makes motorcycling look unsafe. Person was running a relay in a gym class. Said, run down, tag the wall, come back, tag your partner. Okay? Now this is an elementary school gym, which means that on one end of it, there was a stage, because that's in every elementary school gym. Which means that every kid who was running near the stage was running so fast they could not stop, because kids love to do one of these and slide up on their belly on the stage. Teacher knew that. He was no dummy. He gave them 20 yards between the time they tagged their partner and the time they go to the stage. Kid ran up, tagged the wall, came back, tagged his partner, ran into the stage, knocked out 3 teeth. Parents are now suing the teacher. Insurance company calls, says, Neil, help. And he said, read the stuff, tell us what you think about the case. And I read it, and he said, what do you think? I said, I think your teacher was negligent as sin. But the good news is we're going to win the case anyway. And they said, what do you mean? I said, your stupid teacher said, run down, fracture your wrist on that far wall, and if you're lucky enough to get back, tag somebody on this side. I said, you don't build walls in gym for people to run into. I said, and then you don't tell them to run into the walls. But that's what this fool did. But it didn't matter because nobody got hurt at that end. They could not talk about that stupidity in the court. All they could talk about was what happened at the other end where he wasn't negligent. We won the case hands down. He could have gotten 2 kids injured in the same relay. One at the far wall, one at the end. He'd have won one case, lost the other. I'd have probably been the plaintiff's expert on the other, then switched roles quick. And you couldn't have talked about the 2 cases in the same court. Okay? You could, that's what proximate cause is, and that's what it means. That's how important it is. Okay? Let's look at the areas of concern. Let's look at the places where we most often have a problem. First and foremost, supervision. The reason supervision, and by the way, supervision, faulty supervision or inappropriate supervision, is alleged on virtually every negligence case. It is not always the primary allegation, but it is always, almost always, there. And the reason is because it's an absolute. We are obligated to provide supervision. And it's a matter of quality and quantity. You have to have enough supervisors, and they have to be properly trained. Okay? So, in terms of the quality, you have your Motorcycle Safety Foundation. You have certification programs. That's critical. Believe me, if I were going to run a program of motorcycle safety at Rutgers, where I hire the people to do those kinds of things, all over on motorcycle safety programs, teaching and physical education and recreation, you could not pay me enough to hire somebody who wasn't certified. Now, does that mean they cannot be negligent? No. Does it mean they cannot be sued? No. Does it mean you can't come at me and say I shouldn't have put them on the floor? You can come at me and say it, but you aren't likely to succeed in winning it. Okay? Because of that respondeat superior concept, I'm obligated as the hiring person to make sure the person I put out there is qualified. Now, what rhyme or reason do I have for putting him out there? I'll tell you what rhyme or reason. If there's a certification, that's the thing. Second level, don't assume because you got your certification in 1980 that the attorney is going to be thrilled to see you in 1988 if you haven't done anything in between. Because one question they always ask in depositions and interrogatories, depositions is the interview beforehand where the bad guy, the attorney for the other side, gets to question you just like you're in court, you're under oath. One question they always ask, tell me what you've done to update yourself, what you've done to keep abreast of it. Have you recertified, if there is a recertification program? What journals do you read regularly? What workshops have you gone to? You know, I feel stupid standing up here saying this to you people. It's like going to church and chewing people out for not going to church. I mean, you're here doing it, all right? I worry about the ones that aren't here. So, you know, when you go back, make the point to those that aren't here, who should have been, or others who, you know, should be taking advantage of what MSF has to offer, because they're the ones that need that piece of information. I can tell you it's critical, and it doesn't last forever. You know, well, what did you? Well, when I had this program in 1975. What have you done since then? Well, I've taught a few times. I wouldn't. Do you really think that nothing has changed since then? These are the kinds of questions they'll ask. Okay. Quantity. I don't worry about the number, not the sheer number. I mean, you have a number guide. 8 to 1, isn't it? And then, right? And if you get 2 instructors, if you get an assistant instructor, you can go to 12. I remember. You taught me that last night, I remember. Okay. fine. You're not going to violate that. People rarely violate the absolute numbers if they can avoid it. You know the one they violate? The body position. They've got the right numbers, and they're not watching them anyway. I really was impressed when I looked at your range guides and your range cards to see that it told you about placement, about where's a good place for you to stand while you're doing this. Where's a good place for you to observe from? That is no small importance, folks. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you something. God forbid somebody gets hurt while you're running one of those range drills and you're not standing there, you better have a heck of a good reason why you weren't. Because that is the recommendation of the experts. And I'm now speaking as the way it would come out in court. And if you're going to do something other than what that recommendation is, you better have an awfully good justification, and you better know that there's a bunch of other experts who are going to say, yeah, they were right for doing it. Now, I'm not saying you don't ever do anything different, because Lord knows we'd never learn to improve things that way. But don't do it without thought. Don't do it just because it's easier, or just because it's quicker, or whatever. You want a real good reason. Because anytime you have a guide, as you have here, you have a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it provides excellent, excellent protection for those who follow it. But on the other hand, it's a heck of a weapon in the hands of the plaintiff's attorney, the attorney for the injured person, against those who don't follow it. Okay? And so, while you've got the best of all worlds, and again, I feel bad. I'm telling you people who really probably don't even need this information. But be aware of that, please. There are two kinds of supervision. There's general and specific. General is that overview of the whole group. Right now, if this were my group and I were the instructor, I can see you all. I'm accessible to you all. There's no problem there. There's no problem. If anything goes wrong, I can see it and I can react. That's general supervision. Specific supervision is that one-on-one, one-on-two type thing, that close-on, hands-on help when someone needs it. Normally it's required when somebody is first learning a more difficult or dangerous skill. It's often required until the person is sufficiently skilled and knowledgeable of what's going on to take care of themselves, until they understand enough about it to be protective of themselves, to be able to help themselves if a difficulty occurs. Okay? The catch is that providing specific supervision does not absolve you of your responsibility for general supervision. Okay? I'm going to give you fits, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right now, I'm still providing general supervision. And I can come over here and I can work with Jerry, and I can help him with whatever he's working on. And I can say, gee, Jerry, you're doing well. Okay, everything's going great. That's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. And now I can come over here and I can work with Doug. And I can say, Doug, everything's still going fine. This is good. This is great. You're doing a good job. But now, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to work with Rebecca. And she's better looking than either of them, so I'm going to stay here a while. And moreover, I'm going to stay like here. Nobody's supervising any of you back there while I'm talking to Rebecca. My back's to you. And in the strictest legal sense of the word, if something goes wrong that I could have seen, should have seen, would have corrected, I just lost a lawsuit. And I don't care about the numbers. I don't care if there's only 3 of you. If 2 of you are behind my back and I'm not watching, I'm not supervising. You know, when a telephone call for so-and-so, okay, I'll be right there, sit. And while you're gone, something goes wrong. You go out on a range, you set it up, you say, boy, if I just brought out 2 more cones, I could do this extra thing, it'd be fantastic. Keep going, I'll be right back. While you're gone, something goes wrong. Or the real scary one, an injury. You take them to help, and it's not a life or death emergency. And while you're gone, something goes wrong with the people you left there. You lose a lawsuit. Okay? Let me clue you in on that one right away. If there's an injury and it's not life or death, you got a couple of choices. If they're walking wounded, send them with 2 other people to help. I can see the Army men smile when I say walking wounded. Yeah, I know, I was in the Medical Service Corps. What I mean is, it's an arm injury or something else, everything's fine. Send them with 2 other people. Never send them alone. Sure, when they get hurt, the adrenaline's pumping, John Wayne syndrome enters in anyway. Say, I'm not hurt, it's okay. Okay, fine. Walk in there and get, wherever you're going to send them. and they start walking, and halfway in they pass out. That's happened. Right? If they're not, send somebody out for help and let them come back. You're not dealing with little kids. When people deal with little kids, I tell them, always send two because one gets lost. Your people are old enough that you can count on them making it alone. You can just send one responsible person to get help. Okay, first aid. You are obligated, you and all your instructors, the instructors you train, are obligated to know and apply first aid when necessary. That's important. I don't care how close help is, you have to be able to perform the stabilizing procedures until help can get there. That's part of your supervisory role. Do you have to be a certified first aider? No. Why not? Because Red Cross certification includes a whole bunch of things like poisonings and stuff that you'll probably never have to deal with, and all they really care is that you can apply that type that is most necessary. Okay? So, take my advice, and if you don't know first aid, pick up that which you should know. I.e., what to do with bleeding, you may have to encounter that. What to do with a suspected break, or especially a suspected spinal injury, because you have to recognize the signs and symptoms and know what to do, and specifically what not to do. Low-level first aid. You're not supposed to be a doctor, etc. And by the way, you know the Good Samaritan law, right? That's the thing that says, you can't get too... That doesn't apply when you have a duty. That only applies if you're riding down a street, you see some total stranger bleeding in the side of the road, and you stop to help them. You have no obligation or responsibility to that person. Okay, fine. But if we're talking about a situation where the person is in your class or under your care, you have a duty to them. And forget Good Samaritanism. Next activity, selection and conduct of the activity. We have to use activities that are appropriate for the ability, the skill, the knowledge of the people involved. Again, that program, that instructional program that you use, is your best defense because it is set up step by step, because it has screening procedures, it has testing procedures. That's what they would ask you in court. They're going to ask you, how did you know that person X was ready to do skill Y? And you're going to say, I knew it because they had done skill A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then the next logical one was Y. And they had done all those others successfully. That's how I knew it. Okay? It's critical. It's critical. And by the way, keep records on it. Keep track of it. Following that thing gives you guaranteed records. I always follow these procedures. I always follow these steps. I know he went through it because I never do it any other way. That's good. That's great. That's great. I am really, as you're probably guessing, I'm really a bug. I'm really convinced of the value of standardized curricula when they're good. I really am. They are a lifesaver. I've seen them save many, many people in court. Your instruction must be accurate. It must be current. And understand this about instruction. Most people don't make mistakes in the instruction, especially if they've got something like you've got. You know where they make their mistakes? In feedback. They tell a person how to do it. They explain how to do it. And then they make the same assumption that the person does. That's what I want it done. That's the way I wanted it done. That's the way it's going to come out. As long as it's a physical skill, that may not be the way it's going to come out. And that person who did it, in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, is going to believe they did it right. Right? In other words, if they don't fall off that thing, they'll probably assume they did it right. Now, they may not have done it right. They might have just been lucky that they didn't fall off. Your job is to let them know. Give them that feedback. And again, your program is good about that. The testing that goes on, the kinds of things that it tells you to look for and tell them about. That's exactly what one should do. That's exactly what one should do. Because we know, and the courts know, that merely telling someone when it's a physical skill isn't sufficient. That they're going to need to know as they do it how well they're doing. They're going to need to be given corrective information when it's appropriate and told when it's right. Warnings. I really liked hearing about the program this morning that they were talking about, and they talked about what was going into the first module, and right up front in the first module was warnings. Great. I can't stress enough the value. We are obligated as instructors and supervisors to provide warnings of dangers where appropriate. When there's a risk, we have to tell people about it. People say, oh, they might be scared. Yeah, they might be just scared enough to be careful. They might be just scared enough to pay attention. That's good, not bad. Most of the megabucks, multi-million-dollar football cases that went down, quadriplegia injuries in football, most of them that went down in a very large part because neither the parents nor the kids knew or understood the risk of quadriplegia. Most of the kids didn't even know what quadriplegia meant. And the average high school kid considers him or herself to be absolutely invincible anyway. Oh yeah, I knew somebody one time actually broke a hand. Oh, worst thing I ever heard. Quadra what? Okay? Believe me, warnings are important. Warnings are important. And that understanding, and I'll tell you why. Take it on faith now. When I get to the defenses, I'll tell you why it's so important. A mismatch is when the person is not ready for the activity or the skill or the machine that they're using. It's when you admit it. In sport, it also means where you're going head-on-head with somebody who outweighs you and has more strength than you. But in your context, it means a situation where somebody's on a bike that's too big for them. Where someone can't quite reach all the appropriate things that they have to reach. If it's there, let them know it. If they haven't bought one yet, help them know how to pick out one that's right for them. Okay. Protective measures. Helmets. A, you want to be very, very sure that you absolutely require all the appropriate protective measures in everything you're doing with the people, which you do, of course. And B, you want to make very, very sure that they understand not only what, but why, and how to select them on their own. So they understand the importance of it. So that they understand what they do and what they don't do. Again, I'll go back to the football helmets. I was looking at your headgear and your helmet. At least looking at the ones that were won here as door prizes. And over and above being colorful and everything else, they're great. I mean, they've got a lot of nice padding. But there are some things they won't do. They won't protect your spine at all. Neither will a football helmet. But some people think when you put one on, you're invincible. Nothing can hurt me now wearing armor. It's not like that. And they have to know what these things will and won't do. And what can and can't be expected of. The environmental conditions. Over and above providing good instruction, over and above providing good supervision, etc., we have to provide for a safe environment. That means your range. You've got very quick guidelines for the range. Be careful of those winds that I heard about this morning. You know, if they shift those dots too much, and you don't notice it and you run your course on one of those ranges where the dots have been shifted too much, it may, and I say may because I'm no expert, but it may make that a dangerous range. It may make that an unsafe environment. I heard this morning about the effects of various factors on traction. Okay? I know about it in theory. I don't know about it in practice, but I would assume that there comes a point where certain kinds of range activities on certain kinds of surfaces might be a little risky. I see people going, yup, don't do it. Or don't let anyone else do it. Make sure your people know about it. Make sure you bring it home again. Make sure you remind them. Okay? That's the environment. And there are two ways you're supposed to get understanding of your environment. The first is what we call constructive notice, and the second is what we call actual notice. Constructive notice is that kind of thing that you get by doing your job, by checking it first. Don't ever, if I can give you one absolute, don't ever let anybody run a range that you haven't checked first. Don't assume because it was fine when you left it yesterday at 4, it's okay this morning at 8 a.m. Don't assume nobody broke a six-pack out there last night. In fact, if that range were on a Rutgers University campus, I know which way I'll bet, and I'll win my bet. Okay? Now, somebody falls and doesn't really get hurt in the fall, but they get cut the ribbons on that broken six-pack. You're going to get sued. That doesn't belong on your range. It's an unsafe environment. And it's something you could have and should have corrected easily. Okay? Or we have at Rutgers, we don't anymore, thank God, but when I first got there, they used to play on intramural fields that I lovingly referred to as our corduroy fields. Yeah? For obvious reasons, that's what they look like. They were the parking fields for the football stadium on Saturdays. You know what happened on a Monday if you had a rain on a Saturday and cars were parking out there and then it dried up nice Sunday? You had your corduroy fields. Well, what if you're running a range like that, or something where, you know, something can happen over a weekend? You go back Monday, boom, here's a problem, and nobody checks it. You just go out and have people running, and you find out when the first person falls. That's not the time to find out. So don't ever go on one without checking it first. Maintenance. I mean maintenance on your equipment, maintenance on everything else. And again, telling the people the importance of maintenance to keep their own vehicles safe. And again, I know it's in the guide. I know it's in the book. I know it's in the materials they get to read, because I got to read them. Okay? That's important. It's great. And so really what I'm standing here doing is telling you that you're doing most of it right. And all I'm doing is reminding you to keep doing it and not to get careless about it. That's an important thing. We often do something so often by rote that we stop thinking about the fact that we're doing it. And that's when it can get just a little hairy. So you want to keep your mind on what you're doing. Again, the appropriate equipment. You can make a safe facility unsafe. Here's what I mean. You've got a range layout. And you lay that range out. And then right next to it you put another range. Because it's, you know, easier to supervise, keeps them close together. Well, if they're too close together, two perfect ranges can now be one unsafe circumstance, can it? Because you can have a person who goes too far from one come into another person who's just gone too far from another, or maybe not even too far from another. You've made a safe situation unsafe. Right? You want to be careful of that. We often, too often it happens. Too often it happens. Or you put your range and it's just, you know, there's a tree right by the last turn. Ah, there's enough room to make it. Well, what if there isn't? Know that you want free area around it. Know that somebody's liable to lose control and need a little space to straighten out. Whatever. Let me share one other thing, and I ripped by this and I want to share it. I want to go back to it. When I talked about readiness, if one of your students tells you, I can't, I'm afraid, I don't want to, you've just been told by the best expert in the world that they're not ready to do it. Don't ever force them. Don't ever force them. Because God forbid something goes wrong. That is a case you cannot possibly win. You may be convinced that they're ready. You may be convinced that they have the skills. And by all means, you have both the right and an obligation to try to help them recognize their readiness and accept their readiness. But when push comes to shove, don't force them. Because if they're that afraid, they're going to be tight anyway. They probably won't do as well as they should. And as I said, God forbid something goes wrong, you can't win. You were just told by the best expert that they weren't ready. And by the way, that includes things like, well, that's okay, you don't have to do it if you want to be a sissy, we don't mind, we understand. The courts know that that's a stronger kind of coercion than, you know, things like, well, I'll fail you in this course. Okay, fail me. But don't call me a sissy in front of all these people. You know, that kind of thing is a stronger coercion, and the courts know it. So you want to be real careful what you do with that. Let's talk about defenses, because I don't want you to think that all you can do is get sued and lose, and I want to make sure I leave some time for questions too. Informed consent and indemnification. The first thing is a waiver. You know what a waiver is. It's that form that people sign that say, I won't sue, nobody's going to sue. If they're a minor, they say, my parents won't sue. And even if they're an adult, they say, my wife won't sue, my kids won't sue. Nobody's going to sue. As long as you know it's not worth most of the paper it's written on, keep getting it. Here's why it's not worth as much. Number one, because if they're waiving somebody else's rights, nobody waives anybody else's rights to anything. Okay? I can't waive my wife's rights to anything. I can't waive my daughter's rights to anything. If I get killed and they want to sue, I can't stop them no matter what I sign. If I don't get killed, I can't stop them. Okay? Secondly, and that includes regardless of their age. Secondly, the courts don't like to see somebody able to get themselves out from under responsibility beforehand. Because they know if they can, they don't have to be as careful. And the courts don't want to see people saying, well, I don't have to worry about this one, he can't sue me anyway. Okay? So they don't like that kind of a thing. Third, if it's a municipal entity, if it's any kind of a public program or a general public program, state-run program, etc., that is paid in any way by tax dollars, the people have a right to it, and you can't ask them to give up one right to take part in another right. You ask them to give up their right to sue to take part in their right to be in that program. Wrong. Now, does that mean you don't get them? Heck no, man. Let me tell you, if a person believes they've waived their rights, they waived their rights. Right? If I can convince you that you can't sue, till somebody convinces you otherwise, you can't sue. That's point one. Point two, if you do it right, it becomes an informed consent document. It will tell the person what the risks are, or clearly state that they have been made aware of the risks, and it will also tell them what their responsibilities are, or clearly state that they have been made aware of their responsibilities. And further, you will have made them aware of that in the first module. Well, if they're aware of those responsibilities, then they have a certain obligation. Okay? And where that obligation comes in is in the concepts of contributory and comparative negligence. Contributory negligence is a concept that says, if an injured party in any way contributed to their own injury, if they did something they should not have done, or if they failed to do something they should have done, and that was a contributing factor to their own injury, they can't win a nickel. They can't sue you. Well, they can sue you, but they can't win. Okay? Now, most states have swung to what we call comparative negligence. Under the concept of comparative negligence, if they contributed to their own injury, the jury will be asked to assess the relative balance of fault, the relative percentage of guilt. How guilty was the instructor, and how guilty was the student. And the amount of money they can win in a case will be knocked down by their percentage of responsibility. So, let's say you always wear your helmet. I'm going to take a real facetious situation. You always wear your helmet. Fine. And obviously you enforce it religiously. Except today. Today you were a little careless. Today you were a little tired. You just got back from this conference that was held in Tacoma, and it was a long flight back, and now first thing the next morning you're there, and so you're drinking some coffee to warm up. Johnny gets out on the thing without his helmet, whips halfway through a course, falls, gets hurt. Well, if you'd have been watching him, you'd have stopped him. But you weren't watching him. You were negligent. But so was Johnny. Johnny knew better. You'd told him 97 times. You enforced it all the other times. The courts will decide to what degree each of you is responsible. If they say Johnny is responsible 40%, if they'd have given him $100,000, now he only gets $60,000. Many states have a threshold at somewhere around 50%. New Jersey, for instance, has it at 51%. If the injured party was responsible 51% or more, they can't win a nickel. So in Johnny's case, where it's so clear, so heavily enforced, if the jury figures he's responsible 51% or more, he can't win any money. His case is thrown out of court. Some states, like New York, have all the way down to zero. Johnny's responsible 90%. He can still win 10% of the award. That's why those warnings, that's why that understanding the responsibility is so important. If they understand it, if they are informed of it, if they know the risks, if they know their responsibilities, the courts will assume that they darn well better hold to it, that they better do their share. Now, the amount of responsibility they can shoulder for their own well-being is a function of their age and their intelligence and their knowledge of the activity. So the more knowledgeable you make them, the more responsible they become. Okay? So that's very, very important. Assumption of the risk. You know what assumption of risk says? It says, heck, if somebody rides a motorcycle, they assume certain risks. Well, true. But the courts have said no one assumes a risk they're not aware of. No one assumes a risk they're not aware of. Okay, test time. If they're aware of the risk, and they did something wrong anyway, what is it? What kind of situation is it? I just told you.
It's at least comparative and contributory.
That's right. Comparative and contributory negligence. Absolutely. And so, assumption of risk is excess verbal baggage. Either you made them aware of it and they're partially responsible, or you didn't and you are responsible. It's as simple as that. And the courts have said assumption of risk is just excess terminology. We don't need it and it doesn't mean anything. Same thing is true of act of God. You know what act of God is. Act of God is somebody's out there riding on your course and a lightning bolt hits them. And you say, hey, don't bother me, man. That's an act of God. We could argue for weeks whether that's an act of God or an act of nature. And it doesn't matter. The question is, was it or was it not foreseeable? If it's a beautiful, sunshiny day, kind of like today, no clouds around, and somebody gets zapped with a lightning bolt, so be it. I don't care whether you want to call it an act of God or an act of nature or whether you want to call it anything. The fact is, it was not foreseeable. You couldn't predict it. But, let's say the thunderclouds are rolling around. And let's say, you know, da-boom, 1,001, 1,002. Hey, that's okay. We've only got 10 minutes left of class, and that stuff's still 5 miles away. Just keep fooling around out there. Zap! Now he gets it. Was it foreseeable? Sure it was. Are you going to be sued? Probably. Are you going to lose? Probably. Okay? Act of God, excess verbal baggage. Was it foreseeable? That's one of the elements you have to prove. Good record keeping may very well be your best defense. And I give you a couple of reasons why. One, because it provides absolute physical evidence to the jury of what you did. So if we're talking about that curriculum guide, about those range charts, about tests, checkoffs, etc., that provides absolute physical evidence to the jury of how person X got to level Y, of what kind of checkoffs you did, of what you did. That's great. That kind of thing can save you. And the absence of it can crucify you. Okay? How do you justify to somebody when you can't, when there's no rhyme or reason? So that kind of record keeping is great. Another kind of record keeping that I consider to be critical is a good accident report form. Essential. Essential. The average law case will take 5 to 8 years. You want to bet your memory's that good? And as a matter of fact, you may not even find out about it for a couple of years. I know my memory isn't that good. You need a good accident report form. It should list, among other things, exactly what happened, what the injury was, who the witnesses were. Because 3 years from now, if you find out you're getting sued, you want to know what witnesses to contact. A couple of things it should never do. The first thing, if you didn't see it firsthand, if you're filling out the accident report based, for the sake of argument, on an assistant instructor's description of what happened or on the student's description of what happened, don't write it in the first person. Say, John says, Marty says, whatever. Reason. I can guarantee you that the plaintiff's attorney will subpoena your accident report form. They have a brain in their head. Let me give you a case in point. Again, it was a soccer situation. It wasn't, but it could just as well have been in your kind of area. A couple kids are helping in a wounded student, go into the coach's office. What happens? I don't know, coach, I was running along, stepped in a pothole, blew my knee away. Okay. Guy writes down on the accident report, John was running along, stepped in a pothole, blew his knee away. 3 years later, he found out he was being sued. Then he went and talked to the witnesses. Turns out Johnny was outside horsing around, practicing karate kicks. Went to kick another kid, missed him, and blew his knee out. But you know, you don't come in and say, I was fooling around and tried to kick somebody, coach, that's how I hurt my knee. Come in and say he stepped in a pothole. 5 years later, that coach is in court, having just explained to his attorney in front of the jury how Johnny got hurt practicing karate kicks. Plaintiff's attorney comes up and says, can you identify this document? He said, oh yeah, it's my accident report. Who signed that? I did. What's the date? The date of the accident. Will you read to me what you said, where it says, state what happened? Johnny was running along, stepped in a pothole, blew his knee away. Do you expect this jury to believe that your memory is better now, 5 years after the fact, after you've had a chance to talk to your attorney about the possible negligence involved in a pothole on your field, than it was on the very date of that accident when you said, and I quote, Johnny was running along with something. That's all right, you don't have to answer that, thank you very much, no more questions. And the whole jury's going, ha ha, he caught you lying. You don't want to do that, right? If you said, it says, Johnny says, well, why did you say that? Because that's what Johnny said. Here's what I found out later, and you write down what you found out later, okay? Second thing, a never put on item. You don't ever want to put an item on that sheet that says, in essence, what would you do differently next time to make this accident less likely to occur? Or what would you change to make this program safer? I'm serious, I've seen it on a lot of accident reports. I don't want you to go out of here saying, Doherty said, don't ask that question. That's not what Doherty's saying. Doherty says, ask that question every day. The last thing you do when you leave that instructional situation should be to say, what can I do to make it safer next time? Right? I'm not putting down that question. Doherty says, don't ever write the answer to that question on a sheet that he can guarantee to a plaintiff's attorney is going to subpoena. Because let me tell you what will happen. And again, I've seen it happen. Opening statement, plaintiff's attorney to jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't have an expert. I didn't bring an expert with me today. I don't need an expert. I have here a written statement by the best expert we could have, the instructor who was there at the time. And in answer to this question, what would you change to make this program safer? He said, and I quote, and he reads it all. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I submit that if this person had done their job, they would have corrected that before this happened, and the accident never could have happened. I rest my case. I'll be in my office. Just mail the check. And you want to know the real sin of it? You know who always fills in that question? It's the rookie. It's the new kid. The one that gets out there and says, geez, I don't think anything's wrong, but I guess I have to put something in. Let me think. What can I put down? Or it's the angle man, the one that's been there for 20 years trying to get something changed. And now they say, all right, you haven't fixed it before. Well, it may not have anything to do with this, but maybe if I put it down there, now somebody will finally pay attention to me. Yeah, the plaintiff's attorney will pay attention to you. It'll be great. Okay? Don't put that on your accident report form, please. Professional standards. Again, the importance of the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, the importance of their journal, the importance of the little things that come out in their journal. I have seen experts use journal articles out of major publications as support for their position of what was done right or wrong. Right? The guidebooks, the range guides, etc. Those things will be what an expert, for the plaintiff or the defense, will want to drop in front of a jury. Okay? So the more aware you are of them, and here I am again, back in church to people who don't need it. The more aware you are of those things, the better you are likely to be safe when if somebody sues. And again, remember what I said about updating them, recertifying, and everything else. The standards of 1980 aren't necessarily the standards of 1990. Right? And you want to be sure that you can show that you've kept up with it. Last one. This is Doherty's law. You won't see this in a law book anywhere. As a general rule, people do not like to sue those who they like, who they think like and care about them. They don't want to sue someone who they think is very concerned about them and their welfare. Conversely, they are very quick and very willing to sue someone who they don't like, who they think could care less about them, who they think treats them as a number, thinks of them only as another body on a bike, or whatever. Case in point, 2 coaches, each equally negligent, and I mean negligent. Mother 1 stood in front of the plaintiff's attorney and me and said, I don't care what you say or do, you can't put that coach's name on the suit. We'll sue the school, we'll sue anyone you want to sue, but you do not put that coach's name on the suit. He loves my kid. If he thought he hurt Johnny, it would kill him. He's more concerned about his safety than we are. When Johnny was hurt, when he was in the hospital, that man lived in the hospital. When he came home, he brought the team home. He brought his homework home. He brought his girlfriend home. He loves Johnny. He's more concerned with his safety than we are, always has been. And she wouldn't let us do it.
I'll tell you, you want a tough case to win? Try winning one where your prime defendant can't be talked about because of what the mother said. Second case, a coach no more or less negligent. You know, when my Mary was slapping that ball into that goal, she walked on water. That coach couldn't do enough for her. Anything she wanted, she got. She couldn't, you know, the coach lived with her. It was great. The day she got hurt, it was like she dropped off the face of the earth. Sue that! I'm not even going to tell you what she called it. Okay? The only difference was the public relations. That was the only difference. The only difference was the public relations. If I have a reputation for nothing in the whole world when I'm teaching, when I'm with active programs, I want it to be safety. I want every one of my people to think I'm the most safety conscious, most fanatic person in the world when it comes to safety. And nothing would please me better than having gripe about it to a judge as witnesses when somebody got hurt, if somebody got hurt. Yeah, doctor, he's a pain in the butt. Every other word that's out of his mouth. What about safety? Are you doing this? Are you wearing your protective helmet? Thank you, folks. Just complain about me like that all you want. That's the kind of public relations that can be a tremendous help.